This week on Government Matters.
Extending this to the unclassified world is something new.
Companies should pay close attention to proposed guidance from OMB about securing contracted IT.
They are actually stealing your credentials if you see something odd like that.
A sophisticated spear-phishing cyber attack compromised an unclassified system at the Joint Chiefs of Staff.
My friend Jason Chaffetz sort of has an Alice in Wonderland strategy. Whenever there's a problem or perceived problem in the federal government, off with your head.
How will Congress respond to the OPM breach? Government Matters starts right now.
From ABC 7 and News Channel 8, this is Government Matters.
To our viewers around the world on the American Forces Network and here in the nation's capital, thanks for joining us. Government is the engine that runs this city. That's why Government Matters. Every week we'll bring you the top headlines in tech, security, and management. I'm your host, Morris Jones. The Federal Aviation Administration asked NASA to study the work schedules for air traffic controllers. Their findings were alarming. Chronic fatigue made controllers less alert and endangered the entire air traffic system. Perhaps more alarming, the FAA kept those results secret for years. David Curley reports.
This crash in Kentucky killed 49 and alarmed safety investigators about controller fatigue. Other examples, Tennessee, pilots unable to reach the tower on approach, a controller sleeping on a bed of couch cushions.
Yes, sir, we're trying to get a hold of Knoxville approach or Knoxville departure, and we cannot raise them.
A similar situation in Reno.
Can you get a hold of the tower here?
And then at Washington's own airport, controllers asleep and jetliners landing without guidance.
Tower is apparently not manned. We've made a few phone calls. Nobody's answering. So you can expect to go in as an uncontrolled airport.
The fatigue report NASA prepared back in 2011 found controllers reporting worrisome statements. 3/4 of the more than 3,000 surveyed said their schedules led to chronic fatigue. 70% caught themselves about to doze off on the midnight shift. Some wore wristbands or admitted getting less than 6 hours of sleep a night or less than 4 hours before a midnight shift. All this completed nearly 4 years ago, but just released.
I think the problems that this report highlighted 4 years ago are still largely with us. And part of that's a lack of transparency on the part of the FAA in discussing this.
The FAA has made changes and claims the situation has improved, but, quote, fatigue is an issue in any around-the-clock operation. The Union for Controllers says real progress has been made since the report and the FAA changes in scheduling. Among the changes ordered by the FAA back in 2012, 2 controllers now have to be in a tower on the overnight shift. David Curley, ABC News, Reagan Washington Airport.
A different federal employee union has ushered in a new president. Tony Reardon, he's on the left, won nearly 90% of the vote at the National Treasury Employee Union's 55th National Convention. It was held in Florida this past week. Reardon succeeds longtime President Colleen Kelly.
Over the years, I have learned that one of the reasons our path is so often difficult is that federal employees work under the radar. The country depends on you to do your jobs without a lot of fanfare.
Kelly, a longtime IRS agent, brought her own sense of humility to NTEU. After 16 years as national president, she will retire to spend more time with family in her native Pittsburgh. In Tech Matters, new guidance for securing contracted IT. The Office of Management Budget says the threats facing federal information systems have dramatically increased, and it's time to strengthen cyber protections. They want contractors to step up info sharing and agencies to improve the contracts they write. For more, I'm joined by Steve Charles, co-founder and executive vice president of immixGroup. Steve, this is a pretty heady document. It's based on FSMA, NIST publications, and executive orders. Does OMB simply want to pull a bunch of security rules together into one easy-to-follow handbook?
OMB is seeking to put together a series of security controls, much like federal business systems need to adhere to. But in this case, for contractor systems that are handling government information. We're talking about unclassified information, but information nonetheless that needs to be controlled. And so OMB, NIST, the entire federal government is saying to contractors and contracting officers, put contracts in place that require contractors to make sure their systems meet the security controls, and also report whenever there's a breach.
Now, cyber incident reporting is a key part of this proposal. Here's an excerpt. Agency contracts often lack language governing when and how contractors are required to report information security incidents when they occur, and when and how contractors should provide notification of breaches to affected individuals and third parties. Now, this sounds a lot like CISA, the Cybersecurity Information Sharing Act. Privacy concerns derailed that bill in the Senate this month. Will contractors view new language on cyber incident reporting as a violation of their privacy?
Oh, that's an interesting question. You know, we're talking about sharing threat data for the benefit of other systems. Federal contractors working for federal government and interfacing with federal government systems are the first line of defense, and as the government sees it, potentially the first line for a breach. And so sharing information about a breach or indicators that there might be a breach occurring would be step number one.
Steve, OMB will review compliance during FedStat and CyberStat sessions. What are those?
So CyberStat, FedStat, PortfolioStat, TechStat, these are OMB sessions where OMB conducts meetings with the C-level folks at each of the agencies around their particular agenda items, their particular concerns. So TechStat was the first one, and that was reviewing all the IT programs in terms of whether they're on time and on budget. PortfolioStat looks at all of the different systems from a perspective of redundancy. CyberStat is looking at all the systems from the perspective of cybersecurity, and all of this information is maintained in the OMB's MAX portal.
Now, they also want agencies to write contracts differently. Here's a passage about security assessments. The agency should specify that the contractor will afford the agency access to the contractor's facilities, installations, operations, documentation, databases, IT systems, devices, and personnel used in performance of the contract, regardless of location. Now, does this happen today, or is OMB asking for something new?
So this happens today to a certain extent in classified systems where contractors are running classified systems. Extending this to the unclassified world is something new. My recommendation to anyone is to make sure that if you are running such systems and your systems interface with such systems, that you create clear lines of demarcation so that it's very clear what is government information versus what is your normal business system.
Now, let's summarize this, Steve. Overall, will industry embrace this proposed guidance, or will it be met with a lot of opposition?
So we're talking about over 100 security controls that contractors are going to have to implement into their systems. Such things take time and money. Industry is going to have to understand what all of these mean for their particular situations and comment accordingly so that everyone understands what's really involved and how much time and resources it's going to actually take.
What kind of paperwork are we talking about? You brought an example of before and now, right?
Right. So the government's own IT systems need to conform to FISMA, to the risk management model and the security controls. And this is a hard copy of the security controls that federal government business systems need to comply with. Lest contractors think that this is all out of control, we're talking about a much smaller document.
All right, good.
Hundreds of controls less. So I really think it's pretty well thought out, but the devil's in the details, and everybody needs to take a look at this and understand exactly what it means for their systems and comment accordingly.
I should mention we've only touched the surface of this proposed guidance. Viewers can find more details at policy.cio.gov. OMB will accept comments until September 10th. Stephen Charles of immixGroup, thanks for being with us.
And thank you.
The Joint Chiefs of Staff got a very real lesson in the importance of securing unclassified IT. Their email system was hacked. The persistent threat of spear phishing attacks straight ahead. In security matters, all signs point to Russia. Military officials tell the Washington Post Russian hackers infiltrated an unclassified Pentagon email system last month. It's the latest in a series of spear-phishing cyber attacks. Joining me with more is Aliya Sternstein, senior correspondent for Nextgov. Aliya, let's start with the reported breach into an unclassified Joint Chiefs of Staff email system. What do we know about it? Not much, I understand.
That's right. The Pentagon does not want to reveal too much information because of national security repercussions. What is known is that suspicious activity was detected on the Joint Staff network. It was isolated, taken offline so that the Defense Department could hunt for hackers, alleviate any damage, and fortify defenses. That system is coming back online right now.
Now, a few days later, the Department of Homeland Security told federal agencies to be on the lookout for malicious emails. The alert from U.S. CERT didn't include a lot of information. Tell us more.
Well, it was a very broad warning about malicious emails that take computer users at agencies and companies to websites that look like their own agency website or corporate website, when in fact these websites can either upload software that steals information from these computer users or disrupts the network. And the warning from the Homeland Security Department did not specify what these websites look like or what the emails look like. It just said there are 3 different kinds of spear phishing campaigns out there. Be very careful about the emails you receive and make sure when you are entering information onto a website, it has the correct web address for your agency or company.
Researchers trace these latest attacks to Russia. Why would they target the Pentagon?
Well, there are some military tensions going on in the Ukraine. Russia's not happy about sanctions that the United States and the EU have put upon Russia because of its aggression in, for example, Crimea, and Russia might want to be privy to some of the intelligence that the Pentagon has on it right now.
That's true, or just raising hell, or all of the above, right?
Exactly. Yeah. Who knows?
Create a problem, get some intelligence, and make life difficult for us as we do for them. Now, in some cases, Russian hackers aren't even all that creative. They used common malware called Trojans to crack a White House network recently. We've talked about that. That's pretty scary. What are Trojans?
Malware that looks innocuous, like it looks like a regular attachment file, and when it is executed, it does really bad stuff, and it allows the hacker to come back into a network after it's been deposited, and that is how hackers allegedly were able to jimmy open the networks at the White House and at health insurer Anthem, and then unload a whole bunch of other scary spyware and stuff that extracted all the information that we've heard about in the news with the Social Security numbers and whatnot.
So getting back to the Pentagon, how do you think they're going to respond?
That no one in my industry is supposed to know, but they have a lot of different tools at their disposal. They can respond through more sanctions. They can choose to respond in a military manner. They could do their own cyber espionage, or destructive malware could be unleashed upon the country. They have to determine what a proportional response is.
All right, we'll stay on top of this story. Aliya Sternstein, senior correspondent for Nextgov. Thanks, Aliya. Lawmakers have not taken a proportional response to this summer's devastating OPM breach. We talk Congress, cyber, and safeguards for federal workers with Congressman Gerry Connolly. Straight ahead. In management matters, the legislative response to OPM. This April, the Office of Personnel Management discovered that data on 4.2 million current and former federal workers had been stolen. In June, the agency learned background checks had been compromised as well. Hackers stole the sensitive information, including Social Security numbers of 21.5 million people. How will Congress respond? For answers, I'm joined by Democratic U.S. Representative Gerry Connolly. He serves on the House Oversight and Government Reform Committee. So Congress held a series of hearings on the OPM breach. Director Catherine Archuleta stepped down, and the White House stepped up cyber efforts across government. But Congress has not passed any OPM-related legislation. Why not?
Congress needs to do several things. One is we have got to make sure that the victims of this cyber attack are made whole and protected. That's almost 22 million people, and that has to be done immediately. Second, we've got to get serious about a cyber security strategy government-wide. These breaches in both the private and public sector are all too common. We don't have a comprehensive cyber policy in the federal government, and Congress needs to get with it. And thirdly, Congress needs to make investments in technology so that we can better protect ourselves. OPM has a myriad of systems, many of them legacy systems that can't even be encrypted and are very vulnerable to this kind of attack.
Now, a bill currently under consideration in the Senate would speed up the adoption of Einstein. The House passed similar legislation back in April. Is there any effort to marry these two bills?
It is my hope that in the fall we will be able to marry these two bills. Had Einstein 3, kind of sounds very Byzantine, but had Einstein 3 been in place at OPM, we probably could have better protected many of the millions of people who were affected.
And Gerry, your Republican colleague, Representative Jason Chaffetz, wants to see more people fired. He sent a letter to acting OPM Director Beth Cobert earlier this month. Here's an excerpt. I write to augment concerns that Ms. Donna Seymour, Chief Information Officer for the Office of Personnel Management, is unfit to perform the significant duties for which she is responsible. Chaffetz says Seymour intentionally misled the agency's Inspector General. So, Congressman, should she step down?
No. My friend Jason Chaffetz sort of has an Alice in Wonderland strategy. Whenever there's a problem or perceived problem in the federal government, off with your head. So everybody who ever has a problem should be fired or should resign. Ms. Seymour actually is, I hope, part of the solution, not part of the problem. She's relatively new to the agency. She's been praised as recently as this week by the CIO of the entire federal government, Tony Scott. She's been praised by the new acting head of OPM as being part of the solution. I just think it's unfair and deceptive, actually, to try to shift the discussion to personalities when there are underlying systemic problems that must be addressed.
Well, let me ask you this. Millions of federal workers feel lost in the shuffle here. They want to be protected from fraud and identity theft, and they want better communication. What can they expect from Congress? What do they deserve?
Well, what we really need to do is accelerate the contracting process at OPM to make sure there's a provider for liability insurance, for monitoring, should there be any misuse of the information that was hacked, so that we're protecting people as consumers. That has to happen right away, and I have been disappointed at the pace of OPM in reviewing the bids on the contract to be awarded. They need to make these victims #1 priority.
Now, the House returns on September 8th. What else is on your federal IT agenda for the rest of 2015?
I think the biggest single thing on our agenda this year is creating a comprehensive cybersecurity policy for the federal government. And for that matter, working with the private sector as well, because they've been victims too. We know there are organized cyber attacks sponsored by the governments of Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea. And we've got to acknowledge that fact and protect against it both diplomatically and technologically. The other thing we need to do is make sure we implement some of the legislation we recently passed, a bill I'm the author of, called FITARA, the Information Technology Acquisition Reform Act, which I think can be very transformative in bringing the federal government into this point in the 21st century with respect to the deployment of technology, the management of technology, and exploiting it as a transformative policy and management tool, not just another commodity.
Good luck with that, and it's nice to have you on the program. Congressman Gerry Connolly, thank you. The government needs to recruit tens of thousands of technologists in the next generation. So far, supply is not keeping up with demand. But take heart, Uncle Sam. We met a talented crop of STEM students willing to sacrifice summer days to hone their craft. Diane Cho reports.
And then list view takes us to photos.
Instead of hanging out with their friends this summer like most teens, these students are learning how to deconstruct Instagram.
I think coding is so important. If we see recent news and just everything that's been happening, coding has been prevalent in every single area of our lives.
Even shaking the device or turning the orientation from portrait to landscape.
60 rising juniors and seniors from across the D.C. metro area were picked at random for the Samsung Mobile App Academy, but they had to enroll or take at least 2 AP or honors classes, earning a minimum 3.0 GPA. In just 5 days, students are taught the skills they need in order to take an app idea from start to finish, but also to code, so that they can create their very own to compete for a scholarship.
And these kids are solving problems like water shortage in California, or how to democratize education for low-income communities. They have really big ideas, and they are tackling them like pros.
Hey, how's it going?
Instructors here stress the importance of fine-tuning their skills in the world of problem solving.
Unless it's solved correctly, and unless somebody's done all of the testing and all of the things that go along to the process of it, coding doesn't matter how well it's coded.
A lot more devices are interconnected nowadays.
Rashub Nahar is from Frederick, Maryland. He says he tried to teach himself how to code when he was just a freshman in high school.
It didn't go that well because it was hard for me to learn. But then I'm like, okay, that inspired me to take the comp sci classes at my school. And then based on that knowledge, I was been able to learn by myself more.
What are super users?
It's just one of 6 camps Samsung is holding across the U.S. For the second time now, the University of Maryland hosted one of them to try to help students further their knowledge and transition into a STEM career. But not everyone fits the mold. This rising senior at Thomas Jefferson High School for Science wants to become a diplomat one day, but still finds the information useful.
So I think no matter where I go in life, this will be such an essential tool.
For Government Matters, I'm Diane Cho.
And a note to our viewers in Washington, we're moving to a new time slot on ABC 7, Sundays at 9 a.m. You can still catch us throughout the weekend on News Channel 8. In the meantime, I'm Morris Jones. We know your week is filled with other matters. Save this half hour for us.